Hello, good evening, and welcome to the TNT Show. Tonight's show is number 115. That's right, we've done 114 shows. And we're delighted at your response, your questions, your feedback. It's all exceptionally helpful to us in working out the best arrangements for future shows. So thank you for that. It's much appreciated. I'm John Drummond. I'm your host for the next 60 minutes. And again, as I say every week, thanks to you, the TNT Show and Indie Live are growing and delivering more exciting shows. You can watch the TNT Show on IndieLive.net, streamed out on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, plus a whole range of other platforms. And if you go to YouTube, you can see all the previous shows. Now you have a chance to support us. Please donate. You'll see the details on the screen during the show. And early feedback from elsewhere and also from our show shows that many of you are upset by the media coverage of recent events. So if you're looking for an alternative voice, well, you found it. We are here for you. The question is, will you be here for us? Please donate. Much appreciated. You know, it's been another great day for British democracy. The new king has declared that the Duke of York will stand in for him when he's not available. Personally, I look forward to his first public appearance as Deputy King. It should be a riot. Tonight, we're talking to two special guests. We were discussing their exciting and truly commendable idea in creating an online library for independent supporters worldwide, and much else besides. And we'll be talking to Bill Lang and Stephen Richard. And they're here for a full hour and taking your questions live, something else you don't see on BBC and the other media. So there's still time to get your question considered. Details will be on the screen. As you know, TNT stands for The Nation Talks. So in many respects, this is your show. We're live and we're free. So if you've no license, it's not a problem. You're very welcome. Now, to our guests tonight. Tonight, The Nation talks to Bill and Stephen. Thanks for joining us, guys. How are you? Bill first, please.
I'm fine. I'm doing well.
Good. And where are you joining us from tonight?
I'm joining you from sunny Aberdeen, except I think the sun's going.
Well, it is 7 o'clock. Stephen, how are you?
I'm fine. It's great to be here. The sun isn't quite set yet down in Glasgow.
Yeah, well, you're a good deal further south, I guess.
Yeah.
So, in a sentence, Stephen, describe the Scottish Independence Library.
Now you're putting me on the spot. The Scottish Independence Library is a resource for people to get authenticated information about independence. It's not all pro-independence. There are critical elements there, but it gives you a chance to look at questions and get the answers to those questions so that you can look at it from your mobile. You're talking to your friends in the pub or in the street, and you can look up an answer and counter some of the stuff that is used against independence.
Well, that's very helpful. Kevin, can you stick up on the screen again, please, the website so that people can go there? Don't do it right now, everyone. Make a note, please, because we've got lots of exciting talk to come in conversation. But you'll see the Scottish Independent Library is at indielibrary.scot. And if you go to team@indielibrary.scot, you can also give them some money. Which I think once you've read the content of the site, you'll be enthusiastic, I suspect, to do, because it is an outstanding resource, absolutely outstanding resource, which begs the obvious question, Bill, how come this hasn't happened before?
Well, first of all, Stephen and I can't claim credit for coming up with that idea. Back in spring 2021, Professor Ian Black, in his capacity as board member for the Scottish Independence Convention, launched an appeal for volunteers to build a website and when I first saw it, he'd mentioned Commonweal documents, and I thought, oh, he wants to electrify the Commonweal documents, but it's turned into something much bigger and better than that. You know, we've had to talk about taxonomy, reading age accessibility, search engine optimization, and initially we had 22 people joined the first Zoom meeting, and now we're down to 6 people. So I guess this is fairly standard for voluntary operations. So
But
there's
you know what they say, Bill?
Yeah.
One volunteer is worth 10 pressed men.
Well, yeah, okay.
Well,
So
think of it this way.
On the,
Think of the cast of thousands at Pacific Key and look at their output.
yeah,
And look at the output that you and Stephen have achieved.
yeah. Well,
You know, with minimal resources.
there's 6 of us in the team at the moment, and that broadly breaks down into the IT side of things and the curation side of things. So I volunteered on the basis that I'd worked in IT for more the years than I'm going to tell you. Stephen, on the other hand, is in the curation side, and we're also lucky enough to have a member who's run a number of websites and is very familiar with search engine optimization. And we had another member who was concerned with the accessibility, you know, people with visual impairment. And we discovered a lot of interesting things on the way. For instance, it turns out that we had to cater for a reading age that probably surprised us. You know, a reading age of 9.
Me.
Yeah, of 9 maybe or above, which is food for thought.
Sorry, do you mean that the site is geared at people from the age of 9 upwards? Is that what you're saying?
No, and what I'm saying is, well, we were told in the course of our discussions that newspapers cater for a very low reading age, right?
Yeah.
And there's a reason for that. There's no point in it not being understandable. Now, I don't wish to insult anybody, but you know, you're wasting your time if you produce, you know, academic documents that nobody understands.
Yeah. Well, it seems to me
there are various online things that help you determine that you're at the right level, and you don't have to dumb things down to do this. You just have to use various techniques such as words with fewer syllables, shorter sentences, significant kinds of punctuation help, so that doesn't make it for 9-year-olds. It's for 80-year-olds as well. It's for the academic as well as this school child, you know, and that's just because of these things we can do a lot of quite sophisticated stuff, but using these techniques to keep it simple.
Somebody once told me, Stephen, that your average or typical tabloid never uses words with any more than 6 letters.
So you know exactly what we're talking about. Right?
Yeah, well, you know, it's we are where we are. You may start off by wishing that everyone was smarter, brighter, cleverer, more articulate, and all the rest of it. But the reality is that if you don't reach your audience, and I say that because I have a guilty conscience. I mean, I write a column in the Sunday National, and from the point of view of self-criticism, I'm always taken aback that I use long words. When I write the column fairly quickly, I keep telling myself I'm doing it because I'm pressed for time and there's no other alternative word. But it's a cop-out, frankly. I should do what you guys do. I should say, no, that's not, you're going to have to do this again, and this time use short words.
Well,
and I never get around to it.
Recently, we had as a team come up with a press release for the soft launch of the site, and we put it through one of those programs that Stephen's talking about, and I was horrified to see all my words being removed.
What are these magic programs that you use? Because clearly I need them desperately.
Well, I can't put my finger on it. It was one of our other team members who's got experience doing this, you know, and it was all to do with search engine optimization as well, you know, that
yes, Yeah.
What search engine optimization means is you want to be the first website that Google comes up with when somebody puts a search in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And are you?
I think we're quite near the top.
Good. Excellent. Well done.
Yeah.
Because that's no mean achievement.
Well,
it isn't.
last time I looked, we were quite near the top.
Good.
Things change,
Good.
obviously.
So what part of the process are you most proud of, Stephen?
I suppose the fact that we have almost 1,000 entries on the site as we go to the soft launch. These entries are serious pieces of work, largely directed by my interests. I don't like videos very much, so there are no videos yet on the site, unless somebody snuck them in. But that they're sensible, reasonable, reasoned discussions. But these support the questions. We have looked at the Google questions about independence, and these documents support the answers we give to those questions. So that when someone says, well, I was going to say something that isn't there. What are we going to do about the monarchy when we're independent? Well, nobody knows yet, but the answer is that will be decided by the population after independence. It's not a thing to be determined by independence. So there are a number of hot topics that we try to keep up to date with and give answers of a sort. Sometimes they have to be temporary and speculative, but it means that people have a resource that they can respond to a critical comment about independence.
Yeah. I think the other thing is that we don't know what the first post-independence government's policies will be. We can only speculate what independent Scotland might look like. So,
Well, yeah, you're right. I guess what would probably happen if precedent is any guide. I'm thinking about Commonwealth countries now that have become politically independent but retain a connection through the Crown or otherwise to the UK, is that a period of years sometimes before the final arrangements are in place. Certainly the Growth Commission very much is predicated upon that view, that there would be an ongoing connection. It's hard to see how there wouldn't be. I mean, even Brexit didn't happen overnight. So there's plenty of scope, it seems to me, in terms of time to work out some of those details. And before the election of the first independent government. So I assume that the existing government would continue for a period until the independent structures are properly in place. And that would have been agreed with the UK government in terms of a timetable of some kind, if historical precedent is a guide.
Yeah, and you don't want to scare the horses by saying this, that, and the other, because there will be independent supporters who are quite happy to keep the monarchy. So, I mean, why make it an issue? First, get your independence. That's what I always say.
Yeah. Would you agree, Stephen?
It must be clear to, well, we want to make it clear to everybody that we're not party political in what is put on the site. We're trying to be impartial in that sense. We do have an independent standpoint, but we don't have a party political standpoint at all.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't even know what the political views, well, I know some of the political views, but I don't know what political parties my colleagues on the team have. We just don't discuss it.
But one of the things
that makes you a bit like the TNT show, because we've had people on the show who are very much not supportive of independence, and it makes for a better show, in my view, because it's otherwise you end up preaching to the choir to a degree.
Yeah, one of the things we kind of decided fairly early on, although the team is all pro-independence, is that we weren't a campaigning organization. We weren't going to try and turn soft no's into yeses. We would just got to present the facts and let people make up their own mind.
Yeah,
And that's been quite difficult. It's been quite difficult for me to restrain myself, sometimes. But
Bill and I often have interesting conversations before our meetings start up, and I think Bill's a little bit more radical than me, but not a great deal.
Fortunately, I can do my campaigning stuff out with the Indie Library.
I think it's a refreshing change, though, not to be a campaigning organization, because as soon as you start campaigning, you get yourself into a different ballpark, as the Americans would say. I mean, for example, I set up a charity called the Constitutional Commission so that we could talk about a constitution for an independent Scotland as a charity. And you only get charitable status if you're non-partisan. And it worked successfully for a number of years until 2014 came along. And then the no side reported us to the charity commissioner.
Well, we've been talking about that very topic. We're certainly a not-for-profit organization, but
yeah,
we would also like to be a charity just because we would get free stuff.
Yeah, well,
I don't think we can't be. I don't think we qualify as a charity.
Well, you may well do. I mean, the rules are fairly clear. You can't be partisan, but at the same time, and we were scrupulous in that regard. But then the Constitution really isn't a partisan issue. I mean, if you're designing an overarching law, it doesn't have to be based on one political party. It should be one that encompasses the whole range of political views. Otherwise, it wouldn't be much of a constitution. In fact, we're seeing right now what happens if you don't have a constitution. It means that if you stand up in a public place and say, I don't support the monarchy, you can then be arrested and charged, even though the law, well, the European law, which is about, I guess, to be changed, allows you that freedom. But you can still be charged with breach of the peace or whatever other legislation is around.
I could expand on that if you want me to.
Go right ahead.
Our new king has just sworn to preserve the Church of Scotland and uphold the claim of right. Right? Now, one of the things that the claim of right does, and there's a lot, it enumerates various things, and one thing is that we have the right to protest.
Yes.
So I'm hoping that these people, if they go to court, can cite the claim of right in their defence.
But just to task you on that, if I may, before coming on to Stephen again, what the new king promised to do was to preserve the Protestant religion in Scotland in the form of the Presbyterian Church.
Yes.
Don't you think that's more than a little bit offensive to everyone who's not a member of the Church of Scotland?
I do, but I'm just focusing. That includes upholding the claim of right. Now, the 1689 claim of right was also very offensive.
But that just two wrongs don't make a right, Bill.
No. I'm interested in the non-offensive bits that we can keep and use.
Well, I think one of the concerns I have is the rather unequivocal support for those who espouse the claim of right, because they seem to do exactly what you just proposed, which is to say there's bits of it which are unwholesome, but let's not bother about those. I think you have to take it head on. I think you have to say this is unwholesome and unacceptable, but the rest of it, and I think you have to have that qualifier as soon as you talk about it, because if you don't, you might leave people with the impression that you are wholeheartedly supportive of the whole package, which I think would be regrettable.
That happens. Yeah. But if we're going down that road, one of the articles of union dealt with how we would tax foreign salt, right? In the new union. So obviously we don't do that in the same way as
this is true. Yeah. I suspect you're By the way, is the Act of Union available, Stephen, on?
The Act itself is not there. There's writings about it, but the Act has not been put on. This is one
Is
of
the claim
the,
of right there?
again, writings about it, but not
Okay.
the right itself.
Okay.
It's one of the problems of a small group is that we need contributions from diverse sources, diverse viewpoints into the library, so that we're always wanting to solicit people who make suggestions to us about something that should be there, just
Okay.
as you have indirectly. So we'll look this up and stick that on. But it's getting a lot of things from diverse sources, audio, video, blogs, and so on. Currently, the concentration primarily is on printed documents or electronic documents, substituting for printed, because everything is referred to, even if it's a book, we give a link to where you can buy it. So it's always a source is given for this, so you can pursue things further. I can expand on pursuing things further if you like, but that wasn't your question.
No, but I like to, it's a good point. I'd like to come back to it because we've had a question from Evelyn Hume, who's asking, would there be an answer to the currency question? Is there an answer to the currency question? Because she says it's something which the doubters often ask me about.
There is a question saying, what currency can Scotland have? And there are several answers to that. In brief, Scotland, when independent, can have any currency it likes.
Okay. Well, there you are, Evelyn.
Again, it's not something we can predict will happen.
No. I think what Evelyn is looking for is just exactly as you say, Stephen, a resource that enables her to look at the information that's available and gives her an opportunity to respond intelligently to the people who are concerned about this issue. And it seems to me she's underlined the very value of what you're doing there.
Yeah, no, she's right. She's right. I mean, there
are. I hope, Evelyn, that you'll go to the site and give Stephen and Bill your feedback. By the way, when is your soft launch?
Well, it was last week. I think it was last Monday. Was it the 3rd?
Yes, it was Monday last week.
Cool.
So we're still in the early stages of it.
Yeah, we weren't. Well, you've got to bite the bullet and say, right, we're launching today, even though we've not done everything we want to do. So,
I think, Bill, that's perfectly okay. If everybody who was creating something new and exciting like you're doing waited until every T was crossed and every I was dotted, you would never get anything done, frankly, because there's always somebody who comes along and says, oh, what a pity you did it before you did X and Y, and you think, well, yeah, sure, but I mean, what the heck? You have to start somewhere, and very often the very act of starting provides you with a platform to go on and do other things. So,
I mean, the truth of the matter is the site's been online for probably 2 or 3 months now.
And what feedback have you received to date?
I've not looked at that. I've not looked at that yet. We did.
What I've seen, which isn't very much, it has been positive. And your reaction at the start of the show was an indication of we have things we want to do. We're sorry that are not there. But your reaction was, how much is there? What we've been able to achieve, what it looks like. So it's better than we think.
One of the things we wanted to do almost right from the beginning was have the facility to have articles read to people, in a nice female Scottish accent voice. We know her name, it's Heather, but we haven't got it implemented yet because we have to pay for that kind of software.
Okay. So do you know what the traffic has been on the site so far?
It's not a question that I can answer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's early days. And the key thing is that until people know about it, it's very difficult to be specific about what the reaction is. By definition, you need to wait until you get people responding to your stuff. But if you've got some means of, maybe through cookies or otherwise, to track the interest in the site, it's always a good thing. I was asked tonight, by the way, by somebody who we would like to have on the show, and that was one of the questions he asked me. He said, before I make a decision, how many people are in your audience?
Yeah. Well, we have a team member who's quite au fait with Google Analytics, so I'm sure that. Well, we have a meeting every week on a Thursday, so maybe tomorrow she will be able to tell us something about what's happening.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
And of course, getting known, this broadcast tonight is part of that getting known. So we're very appreciative that you've contacted us and said, tell us about it.
Yeah.
So thank you for that.
It's a two-way street, really, Stephen, because we're happy to talk to you, because we think it's such a worthwhile thing that you're doing. And it seems, I mean, we should do everything for our part. We ought to be doing what we can to help and support and assist people, whatever side of the constitutional question they happen to be on. Because what you're doing, it seems to me, and the reason I get excited about it is because we're way short of a database that's helpful to people generally. I mean, because we all know. I mean, I don't have to tell you about this, because it's common knowledge when you talk to people. Is that outside of the charmed circle of people who are terribly interested in constitutional change, there's a great mass of the folks for whom it has little impact whatsoever. And they're the folks who have the questions.
There's a good reason for that, though. I mean, most people are concerned with their jobs and their families. Right?
Yes.
Independence comes pretty low down in their priorities.
Well, I suspect some of these people will be based in Clarence House and be quite concerned about their futures right now.
But they're not going to be voting for independence.
And we feel for them. We feel for them.
We're not the first group to come up with a library. I believe there was one for the 2014 campaign. And
yes, the National Library of Scotland collected an awful lot of things, including ephemera, about leading up to and immediately after the referendum in 2014. But it was not. It was an internal thing. It was never public, except insofar as the catalogue of the National Library is public. So it was never put in front of the people as we're trying to do now.
I think the one I'm talking about though was a public resource, and
oh yes, sorry.
And one of our meetings, I think we talked to the guy who did it, but I think he was more or less a one-man show, and that's an awful burden for one person. Yep.
So do you think your resource will well, I suspect the answer is probably yes to this, but I'll ask it anyway, that your resource will be something that the political parties will run with as well, and say, look, this is non-partisan, but if you're looking for answers to some questions, most of them are there.
I'm not sure if that will happen. I think it's more likely to be the yes group.
Good.
The grassroots movement. Yeah.
I mean, because it seems to me that there's a lot of information about which is grossly inaccurate, and you must know of the old cliche about once in a generation, which I think stemmed from a throwaway remark by the then First Minister, and has now become some sort of holy writ, because it was never countermanded, it seems to me, certainly in the public prints. Is there any reference to the once in a generation on your site?
I don't think
no, this is a personal response. No, because it was a bunch of rubbish in the first place.
But sometimes you have to say, the world is not flat, and here's why.
My response to that once in a generation thing is I point them to the Smith Commission report, which was the report was agreed by all political parties. And in that report, it said there is nothing in this report to stop Scotland from becoming an independent country in the future. So that's my response to the once in a generation.
We need to get you to put that on the site, Bill.
Yeah.
Is the Smith Commission report on your site?
I don't think it is, by what judging by what
I
David
don't
just
think
said.
so, but I couldn't say for certain.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because it does, based on what you said, Bill, it seems to be, it gives you an eloquent response, because it's then you're referring to an official document,
Yeah.
as opposed to what somebody said.
Well, I would start my tweet, and it's usually a tweet. This is what was agreed by the three main parties in the Smith Commission report.
See, I feel that's very important, because I suspect, and sorry, Evelyn, I'm putting words into your mouth, but I suspect there'll be many people like Evelyn who are saying, I just want to be able to go somewhere and get an authoritative view on what was said and what wasn't said, or what was done and what wasn't done. I mean, and I hate to say that, because I suspect I'm adding to your burden as I say that, because the last thing you want, I suspect, is a whole crush of questions about, have you got this, have you got that, have you got the next thing?
Well, on the contrary, that would be very useful, particularly if people have some link to something that they think is important on the subject they're asking about. This is how the whole library is going to develop, by lots of people contributing little bits.
Yeah,
as a viewer of it, you might say, well, that isn't there. Tell us.
Good.
Because that's how we will expand into what's needed, what the users need, what the public need to know about.
And I mean, thank you for that, Stephen. Just to deal with the mechanics of it, if somebody wants to indicate that to you, do they write to you, or do they write to the general email address?
They write to the team at indielibrary.scot.
We can only afford one email address.
Believe me, Bill, it's a great thing to have only one, because life gets complicated very quickly. And it's on the screen right now, folks, for the benefit of Evelyn and everyone else watching, listening tonight. It's indielibrary.scot, and if you want to email, it's team@indielibrary.scot. So there you are. If you've got something,
there are other ways you can get onto it as well. If you're on the website, you can join to become a contributor, a registered contributor, and that means that you have access to suggest things to us directly that way, rather than through.
Good.
And you can progress on to becoming a curator if you wish. That is a more regular contributor.
Okay. Well, there you are, folks. If you want to be a curator, this is your chance.
Yes.
You're not going to be asked a lot, believe me. So this is your chance. And also, I see you've got a newsletter too.
Yes.
And people can sign up on site.
Yes, they can, in the About section. And we also have a Facebook page as well that people can have a look at for updates.
And the Facebook page is called, what is it, just simply called Scottish Independence Library?
It's not ourselves, it's dealing with the social media. So I would guess the Indie Library must be in there somewhere.
Okay, that's okay. Well, if it isn't Indie Library, let us know, and we'll post a postscript so that people can, because lots of people like going to your Facebook page, and also they might not want necessarily to. I mean, it's good to give people options, because some people have all sorts of views about social media and are more comfortable using one platform versus another. So it's sometimes helpful to have a choice that people can use. But it's good that you've got a newsletter. Now let's talk about funding. Now, who funds you right now?
We got a grant from the Scottish Independence Foundation of £3,000, from which I think we've spent about £500. But a lot of what is in place now is being paid for by ourselves.
Right.
So this is an opportune moment to talk about the guy who developed it. We were fortunate to have on our team a Drupal developer. And Drupal is a content management system, which lends itself quite nicely to this type of project. So he almost had an oven-ready solution, which was really great. It wasn't actually oven-ready, but he had some working system that we could talk about. Right?
Okay.
So at the moment, the website is running on a facility that he pays for. Right? But
So you could use some additional funding, I take it.
well, I was funding, but also we're relying on one Drupal developer, which is not a good position to be in. So what I'm
Yeah.
going to ask for is, are there any Drupal developers out there who are interested in this project?
What sort of developer? I didn't catch that.
Drupal, D-R-U-P-A-L, Drupal.
Drupal. What is Drupal? For the benefit
Drupal,
of my ignorance.
It's a content management system.
Okay, and it's called
open,
Drupal.
It's open source and it's free.
Okay.
And it's used by some huge organizations. It's not a toy system. Right? So
that's good. Well, you don't have a toy site. I mean, it's an excellent site.
No.
And I can see the potential for it growing and developing.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope people watching and listening tonight will take advantage of that and get in touch and say, look, here are some thoughts about what you might want to consider putting on the site and anything else that because you sound as if you're open to feedback, which is great. And I hope people will take the opportunity to do that. If you were to look, as the Americans say, down the pike, say, by the time the next referendum comes round, what would you envisage for the site at that time, which may be a year or two from now?
Can I look a bit further ahead than that?
Please.
Let's say Scotland has become independent, and our independence library has been quite successful and quite useful. I think at one time we spoke about it being a sort of place where future PhD students could go mining for information and write their theses on how Scotland became independent.
Yeah.
So in my book, that would be great if the site serves its purpose and then becomes a historical artifact, if you like. But one of the reasons for the soft launch was that we're very well aware that there's supposed to be a referendum next October, so we have to get in gear and get going.
I think you're absolutely right about the data mining part of it. I think in the future, it sounds to me like it's going to be a wonderful resource, not least because during a campaign, all sorts of nonsense is talked, and all sorts of statements are made, and they very much are not, some of them are not based on fact. In fact, anyone who's watched the coverage in the last 2 or 3 days couldn't help but be struck by the fact that most commentators from London have no idea about the difference between the Union of Crowns and the Union of Parliaments.
They don't even know that from Holyrood, Palace of Holyrood to St Giles is uphill. Several of them referred to going down the Royal Mile. Well, last time I did it, it was uphill from Holyrood House.
Well, I think sorry, Stephen?
One of the things that is important, I think, for people to understand about I was going to say independence, but I mean impartiality of the site is we use something. Well, the original thing we used was spelled CRAP, but we decided we couldn't use that one on the site. So we have another thing which each entry has to fulfill certain requirements to be included. And so if it's looks dodgy for a variety of reasons, it doesn't get in. If it's using controversial and otherwise unsupported information, it doesn't get in. So we have a filtering mechanism to try to weed out some of the unsupported rubbish that is produced by various people who are busy antagonizing people.
I took the trouble before this program to look at that system. It's called CARS, and it stands
Thank
for
you, Bill. I'd forgotten.
credibility, accuracy, reasonableness, and supported. You know, so these we would theoretically look at any article and measure it against those.
Okay. Maybe you could sell it to the BBC.
Well, do you want to
I'm
do a
not sure they
program
know
on?
much about cars. But anyway,
Do you want to do a program on the BBC? Or we've maybe done one already. I don't know.
well, by the way, just as a matter of interest, Stephen and Bill, what do you think of the coverage recently?
Me.
Oh, you don't want to know.
Yes, that's pretty much. I've been trying to avoid it.
I came up with it. I was trying to understand why people were so fascinated by this whole thing, and the metaphor I come up was they're like dogs rolling in roadkill. You know, if a dog comes across a dead animal, it'll roll in it, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm going to play a devil's advocate here because, it's the end of an era. There was the Elizabethan age, if you want to use that term, and it's just ended.
Yeah.
And very often what happens, if you've read a history book or two, these things start off being symbolic, i.e., lots of fanfare, there's lots of discussion about the nature of the coverage, all this sort of stuff. But once that's over and done with, people start to look at the profundities. And it's when that happens that you're likely to see significant change, particularly amongst people who didn't feel very strongly before. It's just the nature of the beast. It's just the human condition in a way that once you get beyond the symbolism, you then get into the thinking part of it, the reasoning part of it. And a lot of the shorthand that was used before the end of the era is no longer helpful or even useful. Oh, by the way, can I just say to Ashbury, look, I suspect that with a reference to the CARS system, that Stephen and Bill have answered your question, will the library fact check information before publishing? And that's categorically the case, as Stephen has pointed out.
At the bottom of the
thanks
website,
for the question.
At the bottom of the website, you'll find a description of the CARS system.
Right. Okay.
On the bottom of the homepage.
Terrific. That's super. Well, again, that puts you way ahead of the BBC. They just say, "Look, we're impartial." End of discussion.
But getting back to what you were saying about the end of an era, I remember the Queen's coronation in 1953, and in some ways that I can't understand, I feel like her coronation and her death is some sort of punctuation in my life, the beginning and end of something. I hope it's a comma, not a full stop.
Well, as a lifelong Republican, because I come from a background that didn't have a monarch in my country. Well, Scotland is now my country, but it wasn't at the beginning. It's highly irrelevant. I mean, what has the Queen done? What has the monarchy done? It has just ridden along with whatever political wind is blowing. And so it's more of a whimper than a bang as the end of, if it is an era.
It is an odd thing. I think the lawyers call it sui generis. I may be mispronouncing that, but in the UK, it's a creature of its own kind, i.e. that the head of state in the UK is not quite the same as the head of state for Canada or for the Bahamas, if the Bahamas is still in the Commonwealth when I'm talking, or Barbados. You can see the logic, of a state having a head of state, because all states have a head of state. The Americans, the head of state is also the head of the government. But it doesn't have to be that way. And some people would say it's desirable that the head of state is not part of the government, because the head of state has to exercise functions which might not be in line with government policy, like getting rid of the government or refusing to accept the government or sending the government back to have another election, which is not unheard of. So it acts as a bulwark or a safety measure of a kind, I suppose. The question is, should that head of state be elected? This is one question. Or should it be the way the UK does it? It's an accident of birth. I can see, Stephen, why you might think, well, why would it make any sort of sense to have a head of state who's there simply because of whose bed they were born in?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I agree. But one of the interesting things I find is that the British government's involvement in setting up the new constitution for Germany after the war, it included an elected head of state, which is separate from the political parties and the governing head of the government. So Britain's very good at bequeathing constitutional arrangements for others that it won't even look at for itself.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, and it's been made before on the show. It may be down to the fact that, well, some of it's inertia, I suppose, and also once you stumble along for a number of centuries, making do and mending rather than saying, "Oh, let's sit down and let's reorganize ourselves." So that
I'm sorry, we've had
democracy.
a very good illustration in the last 2 years of why we need a constitution for the UK. We have been running horses and carriages through the conventions that we laughingly call a constitution.
Well, we don't have a constitution in the accepted sense. What we have is that the UK constitution is whatever the government of the day with a working majority says it is. And that's not acceptable, because the whole point of a constitution is that all parties are subservient to it. All institutions are subservient to it. So that means, for example, if I live in the United States and the government asks me to do something which is contrary to the constitution, I can decline. I can say, no, I don't want to do that. Likewise, if I want to do something which the government doesn't want me to do, like holding up a banner that says, I hate Donald Trump, I can't be thrown in jail for that, because my freedom of expression is enshrined in the Constitution.
This is why the European Convention of Human Rights is so important in Britain, because it's the only institution that we have that can stand against the government. And the UK government is trying to get rid of it for that reason alone, I presume.
Well, even if they didn't get rid of it, I don't. I mean, the government doesn't have to defend itself. All it has to do is pass a law saying the ECHR is now invalid. End of story. That's it. Gone.
The ironic thing is, it was the British government, I believe, who set up the ECHR.
Well, it's not unusual, as Stephen pointed out. Where did the German state get its constitution from?
Yeah.
It got it from the British state.
Yeah.
But you're right. The Foreign Office used to be a dab hand at producing constitutions for others.
So relating back to the India website, I mean, that might be a question that you get. Will Scotland have a constitution? Well, I think the answer is yes, but we have no idea what it will say.
You have no idea what, sorry?
We have no idea what form the constitution will take. What I was just trying to point out, there are some things we can't put in the Independence Library. We can't tell the people what the constitution will be, right? Because we don't know.
Yeah, but you have to go to the people with something during a referendum, and the last referendum contained an interim constitution, which would probably need to be part of any future discussion. We've had a question from Charlie. He says, what does an independent Scotland look like in terms of care for experienced young people? I'm not quite sure what that is precisely, Charlie. But do you mean the care experienced by young people? Yeah.
Well, we've not got an answer to that in the library. But my hope is that when the Scottish government, the independent Scottish government, sits down and decides what its priorities are, one will be that the first priority should be the health and well-being of all the Scottish people. Right? So,
as a past member of the Children's Panel, we have a system in Scotland which is unique worldwide, where we're looking at what the child needs rather than what the child has done. And that works pretty well, but the problem is when children reach 18, they're thrown into the care system. So I can't give an answer, but my hope is that, like Commonweal and some others have put out papers, that the care system will be much more amenable to the needs of young people, and that they can get the help that they need, rather than going from a care system into total independence, which they're not prepared for. But
Well,
that
Charlie's
will
come
not
back
answer
and
the
said that's
question.
exactly the question he wanted to put to you. So that's good. So right now, what happens is that young people who've been in care are simply at 18 dumped into the system. Is that right?
Well, they have about 2 to 3 years of some social care, social worker support, but it's very minimal, and it's constantly challenged by the under-resourcing of our social services.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
You
it's
know,
not perfect, Charlie, but there's an answer to your question that it behoves the new state to look after its vulnerable people, whether they're young or otherwise. And I think we're all agreed on that. Bill, Stephen?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I can see them sitting down with a list of priorities. That's got to be high on the priority list. You know, full employment, low inflation. You know,
Yeah, and if we're looking at a national
decent
care
housing.
system,
Sorry.
yeah, if we're looking at a national care system, then young people and people who are challenged with disabilities and learning difficulties, say, they need attention. They're a valuable part of our community, and we should always recognize that.
Just a quick question. We're talking about children, but not in care. What's your view on when children should start formal school, Stephen?
My opinion is that 6 or 7 is quite early enough.
Yeah.
We have experience from other countries. Finland is a prime example. They don't start until 7. Singapore, they don't start formal school until 7. And both countries have remarkable successes in all areas of basic education. Maths, reading, for example, are much higher than the rest of the world. To start children, as we seem to be doing it, 3, 4, into some education, and by the time they're 5, they're sitting in classrooms, is just too early for almost all children. Starting later would be better. It seems to me that we start children early because it's a good babysitting service.
Well, I was just going to say, if we've got to start them later, we need to have sort of beefed up preschool provision. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean, there are implications of starting later, big implications, but we need to think about what the needs of the children are rather than the needs of the adults.
Well, adults are very adaptable often. If you confront them with a renewed situation, provided you give them enough notice, they might be able to work around things. But then again, it depends what the job market is like. It depends people's ability to afford things. Maybe if the government was to pitch in for kindergarten care, I know they've got a bunch of other priorities, and I guess that would cost a lot of money. But if the argument is that children develop faster because when they have more time to play before they start formal education, then it seems to be a good investment. But I'm no expert.
Children need to be our investment. Children are our investment into the future. Right? Yeah. Children are, if we don't get the proper care, treatment, education for children, we're damaging our future.
Okay.
It's a very high priority.
You know, the government in this country used to understand that, right? I'm of the generation that's known as the cod liver oil and orange juice generation, right? Post-war Britain. We were fed with orange juice, cod liver oil, milk. Right?
But you started school, surely, Bill, at 5, didn't you?
I was 4.5 when I started.
4.5, there you are. What time did you have to play?
Well, not a lot, but you know, personally, I don't think it affected me. Of course, I don't know because I can't rerun it. But I'll tell you what, I think I'm benefiting from all that school milk.
I started school at 6.
But not the cod liver oil.
Well, yeah. I started school at 6, and very quickly got into trouble when I got bored with what was going on in school and shouted loudly, "Ho hum!" This is boring. That was not appreciated.
Okay, we're coming to the end. I did say that the hour goes fairly quickly. Is there anything that you feel, first of all, Stephen, and then Bill, that we ought to have talked about tonight and we haven't, and you would like to address it before we close? Stephen?
Yeah, I'd like to say something about the documents we refer to, the content. What we do is we give a very, very 2-3 sentence at most introduction. We call it the fast facts on the website, but it's a précis of the document, followed by more extensive discussion of the document, which may be enough for people to understand the force of the argument or whatever is happening in the document. And then finally, a reference to where they can go to the full document so that they can don't have to accept our summaries, that they can see the whole thing and read the argument. This is a very important part of leading people through the information, from the question to the reporting answer to the documents that follow it. And you can see quickly, no, this document doesn't deal with the part of the answer I want, but this other one does.
Yeah. I think that's very valuable. I really do, because we've all been in the position where we've gone around in circles and not had time to read a full article and maybe said, look, I'm going to earmark that, I'm going to mark it, and I'll come back to it. And it gives people that flexibility. Bill, is there anything we ought to have talked about tonight that we haven't done so?
No, I'll just reiterate what I said earlier. Being on the IT and support side of this site, I want another Drupal developer.
Yes, we want all the help we can get in all the areas. There is a volunteer form on the website, so you can see the areas where we need help, and please volunteer to take on some of those roles or help in those roles.
Yeah, I hope people watching and listening tonight will take you up on that, because oh, by the way, on the screen right now is the PayPal. You go to team@indielibrary.scot, and you can make a financial contribution to the work of the Scottish Independence Library. But as Bill and Stephen have pointed out, volunteers are always welcome.
Yeah,
it's the nature of the things.
The money is important, and it will become more important as we eat our way through this 3,000 quid.
Yeah, well, I think you've done exceptionally well to get where you are.
Yeah.
With the minimum of resources, and I know you're indebted to the Scottish Independence Foundation for their support. Yeah. But I feel it's perhaps down to others to maybe pick up the challenge from there and come out and support you, both financially and on a volunteer basis. And I do hope people watching and listening will do that. I mean, it's it's. I know I say this every week. Go out there and support folks, but I would say this to people: if you don't like the media, become the media. If you don't like the information that you're getting, here you are. Here's a perfect example of Stephen and Bill and their colleagues have gone ahead and they've taken on board that very thing, rather than sitting there saying, oh, what a great pity we don't have the information database we wish we had. They've actually done something about it. And I respect that, I applaud that, I commend that, and I rather hope that everybody in the audience tonight will feel likewise and get on there and give you the support you need. Yeah. Well, that's time's almost up, gentlemen. Thank you again for being on tonight.
Thank you for having us.
Feel free to use this material in any way that you can, and you're very welcome to it. I'm going to make a few concluding remarks. I hope you'll stay online after the broadcast is finished. So let me just wrap up, if I may. Well, there we are. Another interesting show. A big thanks to Stephen and Bill, and a big thanks to all of you out there for joining us tonight. I hope you've enjoyed the show. As ever, we have a formidable list of guests lined up for future shows. As you know, this is the place for the big hitters, and it's free. There's no license required. And go to the What's On guide at Indie Live to find out more details. I can tell you that we're back next Wednesday on the 14th at the same time, and we will be joined by the Editor-in-Chief of Byline Scotland, Ian Kinsey, So if you want to hear about the media, the news that you're not getting, then you really want to make sure that you tune in for next week's show and listen to Ian. As always, please look out for my column in the Sunday National this weekend. You'll find it in the 7 Days supplement. And I'll be tackling the business of that's been using up most of the screen time over the last couple of 3 days. And in closing, I have to say that one of the most extraordinary accounts this week was that the Queen's beekeeper has told the Queen's bees of her demise.
Yeah.
You heard that right.
Headline news.
The Queen's beekeeper told the Queen's bees of her demise. The Daily Mail, who ran the story, unfortunately did not have space to relay the reaction of the bees to this news, but we wait in anticipation that the bees may respond. And as always, every week, I make the same invitation to the BBC, James Cook, or any of his colleagues, Martin Geisler. I've asked them on Twitter, social media, to appear on the show. That invitation remains on the table. As I've said, you may want to challenge Emily Maitlis's view that a Tory decides all BBC output, and that includes yours, gentlemen. So, as a self-respecting journalist, I'm sure you would welcome the chance to set the record straight. So, stop cowering in Pacific Key. Come out, face your audience, tell us what the true facts are. Okay, remember the crowdfunder for both, please, the Scottish Independence Library and for this fine channel, Indie Live. So to all of you, thanks for joining us. Stay safe and take care. Good night, all.
Good night.